going around the world. So very quickly, what are the factors that make good people do bad things? Mindlessly taking that first small step. Dehumanization of others. De-individuation of self. Anything that makes you feel anonymous. Diffusion of personal responsibility. Blind obedience to authority. Uncritical conformity to group norms. Groups usually are good for us. Some groups are bad, like gangs and cults, and we give them the same uncritical conformity that we do groups that do deserve it. Passive tolerance of evil. A lot of evil is done by people who look the other way, a smile, so that it's the good guards who keep the prison going by not ever interfering with the bad guards. And lastly, it's accepting an ideology that justifies evil. Dostoevsky says nothing is easier than to denounce the evildoer, nothing more difficult than understanding him. So psychology does not excuse theology. Understanding does not excuse the behavior. People are guilty. I mean, I said Chip Frederick, he's guilty. He should serve a sentence. But the situational imperative says the sentence should be mitigated. He should not have gotten 8 years in prison for what he did. So what are the real world parallels? Compare these prisoners going to parole board with this, and captives with bags in Guantanamo. Because they want to go green, they stop putting bags. They use sandbags. Forced fellatio in Abu Ghraib was matched in Basra by British soldiers having prisoners stripped naked, only they didn't put themselves in the picture. In the Stanford Prison Study, in 5 days, our guards had the prisoners simulate sodomy with each other. So I'm just going to... James Schlesinger, in his report, said, psychologists have attempted to understand how and why individuals and groups who usually act humanely can sometimes act otherwise in certain circumstances. That's both the cartoon and that's the Lucifer effect. And he says, the landmark Stanford study provides a cautionary tale for all military detention operations. It should have been so. They knew it. In fact, there are people who said they purposely used the Stanford Prison Study because the worst abuses in my study happened on night shift, because there was minimal supervision, because I was sleeping some of the time. And they knew that, and that's one of the reasons no senior officer went down at night. You tell the guards, do whatever you have to do, and there's no oversight, no supervision, and you get those kinds of things. They never expected them to take pictures. In fact, a book just came out by a friend of mine, Larry James. He was sent to fix hell. After all of the guards went to prison, if that's the reason, it's over. In fact, he went to change the situation so it wouldn't happen again. So that means that the military admitted after the fact that it was the situation that was the main cause. I'm going to skip this. Okay. So a paradigm shift is needed in psychology, psychiatry, all of social science, especially in law, because all of them focus on the medical model, the individual, sufferer, the guilty one, and we treat the individual. We put him in prison, we give him therapy, if you're benign, etc. But if it's the situation, it never works. And that's why evil continues. That's why prejudice continues. That's why violence continues. You have to switch to a public health model that recognizes that all behavior is situationally and contextualized and is part of a system. And it's like when there's a flu epidemic. You don't treat every single person with the flu. You inoculate the healthy ones to prevent them from getting it. So we have to develop prevention tactics for bullying, for racism, for corruption, one of the worst evils around the world, and for violence. The line between good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, says Alexander Solzhenitsyn, a poet. He spent time here at the Hoover Institute, but he was also in the worst prisons of Stalin's Gulag Archipelago. So he says it's not an abstraction. Good and evil are things, again, philosophers talk about. Every day of your life, you are making little decisions to cheat or not, to violate some little law or not, or bigger law. You don't get the corruption that we saw in Wall Street. You don't get the corruption of Bear Stearns, Enron, all of these companies. It's not the first time. Without people stepping the first 15 volts, making a little cheat, a little thing. And then they notice in this case, they notice other people doing it. So that supported them doing more and more. And finally, I argue that the terrible thing about greed is it takes people who are usually rationally future-oriented and makes them narrowly present hedonistic. There's a famous study, I'm going to talk about this afternoon, done by Walter Mischel here in the Bing Nursery. If you had kids, 4 years old, and you say, hey, you just won a treat. Here's a marshmallow. If you wait till I come back, you can have 2. Of course, it pays to wait if you like 1. Half the kids can't wait. as soon as he leaves, they're eating the marshmallow. And I just redid the study with chocolate. It's exactly like the traders on Wall Street. That normally, it makes sense, to wait. You get the bigger reward, so you get a lower risk, lower yield. But somebody's promising high risk, high yield. And they become like 4-year-old kids who cannot delay gratification. And that's one of the psychological reasons for what we just experienced. So in the last 10 minutes, so we have another wonderful website, lucifereffect.com, which has everything about the book. I'm working with 2 ministers, so there's Lucifer Goes to Church. So each week they have a blog on theology and psychology, the whole section celebrating heroism, how to resist influence, and we put on trial George Tenet from the CIA, Rumsfeld, Cheney, and Bush, and up to now, at least 90% of the people voting, there's been more than 2,500, says they are in complicity for the crimes at Abu Ghraib, having created a system that created a situation that did those terrible things. So, what makes some people do good, some people do evil? Now, obviously, I've rushed up. You can just give me a brief overview, focusing on the situation. But let's quickly focus in the last 10 minutes on it's time to promote social goodness, moral courage, and heroism. So we want to end on a positive note. Heroism is the main antidote to evil. Instead of saying, let's find evil and try to fix it, to the extent that we have a generation of young people who are willing to be heroes, that's going to be the main bulwark against evil. And my notion is we want to promote the heroic imagination. We want every child to say, I'm a hero in waiting for the right situation to come along, to act heroically. Okay? And when my time comes, I will act. I will be prepared to act. I will be ready to act. So we want people to self-label, I'm a hero in waiting. And the reason you're going to be able to do that is that most heroes are ordinary people. Hannah Arendt, in trying to understand Eichmann, talked about the banality of evil, saying, monsters like Eichmann, before and after they're put in that situation of Auschwitz, were normal. You put them in a situation, you give them a job, they're like the teachers in the Milgram study. They can do horrendous things. I argue that the equivalent is the banality of heroism, that most heroes are ordinary people. It's the act of heroism that's extraordinary. That you don't have to have special attributes. You don't have to be more religious, more compassionate, more empathetic, etc., etc. In fact, Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, they are exceptions because they give up, sacrifice their whole life for a moral cause. And in fact, that's why we know their name. They are the exceptions. Most heroes are one-time heroes. You don't know their name. They rise to the occasion. In fact, the terrible thing is our kids have all these fantasy heroes. In this new program on television, Heroes, again, these people fly, they get invisible, they do have all these great attributes. That's not us. We are ordinary people with none of those special attributes, except we are ordinary everyday heroes and you're going to emerge in certain situations. So here's a physical hero. Here's the guy, Chinese student, stood in front of a row of tanks coming to crush the students rebelling at Tiananmen Square. Those tanks had, in fact, previously killed 6 students, drove over them, and he was able to persuade the tank commander to turn around and go away. Now, we don't know what happened to him. Some people say he's dead, he's in prison. I know one of the student leaders in the rebellion say they have not been able to track him down. But this is physical courage. Some of you watch the Olympics know here's a hero, this little kid, 9-year-old. He was in that terrible earthquake in China. Most of the kids in his class were crushed, killed. He survived. What he did when he got out of the rubble, he ran in and he helped 2 other kids to survive, pulled them out. And they said, "Why did you do it?" He said, "I was the hall monitor. It was my job to look after my classmates." So here's a kid who's learned the sense of duty, the respect for other people, the sense of, a moral commitment to other people. The reason Abu Ghraib stopped is this guy, the most ordinary person in the universe, Joe Darby from a little town in Pennsylvania. His buddy showed him these pictures on a CD. Those pictures were on screensavers. The soldiers were proud of what they were doing. That's why they kept taking the pictures. They were bragging rights. They said, look what we could do that nobody's ever thought to do. Because Army reservists are the lowest at the bottom of the food chain in the military. The only thing lower than them is what? The prisoners. He looks at these and he said, no, this is terrible. We're supposed to bring freedom to these people, and we're dehumanizing them. He takes this, he gives it to a senior officer, and he starts the investigation. Was he a hero? He had to hide with his mother and sister for 3 years because everybody wanted to kill him. Not only the other soldiers who all got in trouble, people in his hometown. His newspaper said, the newspaper in his town said, Joe Darby the snitch, because he humiliated the military and the Bush administration. I'm going to have